The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Ravencrest Palace, as Lady Margot Blackwood adjusted her emerald silk gown and checked her reflection in the gilded mirror. Her dark hair was perfectly arranged, not a strand out of place, and her smile practiced to perfection. She had spent years perfecting this image of noble elegance. But beneath the polished surface lay a heart, driven by desperation and greed. Queen Isabella of Ravencrest was known throughout the kingdom for her incredible collection of jewels. The royal treasury held pieces that had been passed down through generations, each one worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Lady Margot had been invited to the palace many times as part of her duties as a minor noble from the northern provinces. But today would be different. Today, she would take what she believed she deserved. Captain Marcus Sterling stood at attention outside the throne room, his keen eyes scanning every person who entered the palace grounds. At 35 years old, he had served the royal family for over 15 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense trouble. His tall frame was imposing in the crisp blue and gold uniform of the Royal Guard, and his reputation for loyalty was known throughout the kingdom. He had noticed Lady Margot's visits had become more frequent in recent weeks, and something about her behavior had caught his attention. The palace buzzed with activity as servants prepared for the weekly audience where nobles would present their concerns to Queen Isabella. Lady Margot moved through the corridors with practiced grace, greeting other nobles with warm smiles and pleasant conversation. She had spent months studying the palace layout, memorizing guard rotations, and identifying the perfect opportunity for her plan. Queen Isabella, now in her 60th year, sat regally on her throne wearing the crown of stars, a magnificent piece adorned with diamonds that seemed to capture and reflect every beam of light in the room. Around her neck hung the Ravencrest sapphires, a necklace of 5 perfectly cut blue stones that had belonged to queens for over 3 centuries. On her wrists were the golden serpent bracelets, intricate pieces crafted by the kingdom's finest artisans decades ago. As the formal audience began, Lady Margot listened politely to the various petitions and requests from other nobles. Her heart raced as she watched the queen's jewelry catch the light, each piece representing a solution to her mounting debts. Her late husband had left her with little more than a title and crushing financial obligations. The northern province estates were failing, and creditors were becoming increasingly aggressive in their demands for payment. Captain Marcus positioned himself strategically, where he could observe the entire throne room. His training had taught him to watch for subtle signs of deception or ill intent, and Lady Margot's behavior triggered several warning signals. Her eyes lingered too long on the queen's jewelry. Her hands fidgeted nervously with her own modest accessories, and she seemed to be studying the room's layout rather than focusing on the proceedings. When Queen Isabella announced a brief recess for refreshments, the nobles began to mingle in the adjacent salon. This was the moment Lady Margot had been waiting for. She excused herself, claiming she needed to powder her nose, and made her way toward the queen's private chambers. She had learned from careful observation that there was a 15-minute window when the guards changed shifts, and the corridors would be less monitored. The queen's jewelry was kept in an ornate wooden box in her private dressing room, a space that was supposed to be strictly off-limits to guests. Lady Margot's heart pounded as she slipped through the corridors, using her knowledge of the palace layout to avoid the main pathways where guards might spot her. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound on the polished floors as she approached the forbidden chambers. Captain Marcus had been tracking Lady Margot's movement through the palace, staying far enough behind to remain unnoticed while keeping her in sight. Something about her purposeful stride and the way she avoided eye contact with the few servants she passed confirmed his suspicions that she was up to something improper. He had developed an instinct for detecting potential threats to the royal family, and every alarm in his head was sounding. The dressing room was even more magnificent than Lady Margot had imagined. Rich tapestries covered the walls, and the air was filled with the subtle scent of lavender and roses. The jewelry box sat on an elegant vanity table, its gold inlays gleaming in the afternoon light that filtered through the tall windows. Her hands trembled as she approached it, knowing that what she was about to do would change her life forever. Inside the box lay treasures beyond imagination. The moonfire earrings, crafted from rare white gold and set with diamonds that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The ruby rose brooch, a masterpiece that had been a wedding gift to Queen Isabella from a neighboring kingdom. Most tempting of all was the starlight pendant, a delicate piece featuring a perfect teardrop diamond surrounded by smaller stones that created the illusion of captured starlight. Lady Margot's rational mind screamed warnings about the consequences of theft, but her desperation overwhelmed her better judgment. She carefully selected several smaller pieces that she hoped might not be immediately missed, slipping them into the hidden pocket she had sewn into her gown specifically for this purpose. The weight of the stolen jewelry felt both liberating and terrifying as she prepared to return to the salon. Captain Marcus had positioned himself in the corridor outside the Queen's chambers, hidden behind a decorative pillar where he could observe without being seen. When Lady Margot emerged from the dressing room, her face flushed and her movements slightly hurried, he knew his suspicions had been correct. The way she smoothed her gown and checked her appearance suggested she was concealing something, and her quick glances down the hallway confirmed her guilty conscience. As Lady Margot made her way back toward the salon, she forced herself to walk at a normal pace, despite every instinct telling her to run. She practiced her pleasant smile and prepared casual explanations for her absence, hoping that no one had noticed how long she had been gone. The stolen jewelry felt impossibly heavy in her hidden pocket, and she was certain that everyone would be able to see her guilt written across her face. The return to the salon required passing several more guards and servants, each interaction a test of Lady Margot's acting abilities. She exchanged pleasantries about the weather and complimented other ladies on their gowns, all while fighting to keep her voice steady and her hands from shaking. Captain Marcus continued to observe from a distance, noting every detail of her behavior and building his case for confrontation. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the salon as Queen Isabella prepared to resume the formal audience. Lady Margot had successfully returned to the gathering, positioning herself among a group of chattering nobles near the ornate fireplace. She sipped tea with trembling hands, fighting to maintain her composure while the stolen jewelry pressed against her side like burning coals. Every sound seemed amplified. Every glance from other guests felt like an accusation. Captain Marcus had seen enough to confirm his suspicions, but he needed to be absolutely certain before taking action against a member of the nobility. Accusations without solid proof could destroy his career and bring disgrace to the royal guard. He decided to wait and observe, knowing that guilty people often betrayed themselves through their nervous behavior. His years of experience had taught him patience, and he positioned himself where he could watch Lady Margot without drawing attention. As the Queen called for the audience to resume, the nobles began filing back into the throne room. Lady Margot joined the procession, her mind racing with plans for a quick departure from the palace. She had originally intended to stay for the entire formal session, but the weight of her crime was becoming unbearable. She decided she would make polite excuses and leave as soon as possible, claiming a sudden headache or family emergency. The throne room felt different now to Lady Margot's guilty conscience. The same magnificent space that had once filled her with awe now seemed like a trap. The golden walls appeared to close in around her, and the eyes of the royal portraits seemed to follow her every movement. Queen Isabella's voice sounded distant and muffled as she addressed various petitions, while Lady Margot's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Captain Marcus noticed how Lady Margot kept touching her side where her gown was slightly fuller than before. The bulge was subtle, but his trained eye caught the difference in the fabric's drape. She also kept shifting her weight from foot to foot and glancing toward the exit doors, classic signs of someone planning an escape. He began moving closer, weaving between the other guards and nobles with practiced stealth. When Lord Hamilton of Westmere began presenting a lengthy petition about trade routes, Lady Margot saw her opportunity. She slowly edged toward the back of the crowd, hoping to slip away unnoticed during the boring discussion. Her plan was to walk calmly to the main entrance, collect her cloak from the attendants, and leave the palace before anyone discovered the missing jewelry. But Captain Marcus was ready. As Lady Margot reached the edge of the crowd, he stepped forward and placed a firm but respectful hand on her arm. His voice was low and professional as he spoke directly into her ear, ensuring their conversation would not disrupt the ongoing proceedings or alert the other nobles to the situation. "Lady Margot," he whispered, "I need to speak with you privately about a matter of palace security. Would you please accompany me to the guard chamber?" The color drained from Lady Margot's face as she realized her plan had been discovered. Her first instinct was to deny everything and demand to know why she was being detained, but the steady look in Captain Marcus's eyes told her that he already knew exactly what she had done. Her mouth went dry, and her carefully practiced composure finally cracked. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," she managed to whisper back, her voice barely audible. "I haven't done anything wrong." Captain Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, but his grip on her arm remained firm. "I'm certain we can clear up any confusion quickly and quietly. This way. Please." As they moved toward a side entrance, several other nobles glanced in their direction with curiosity. Captain Marcus skillfully guided Lady Margot through the crowd, making their exit appear casual and unremarkable. To the casual observer, it might have looked like the captain was simply escorting a guest who needed assistance or had a question about palace protocols. The guard chamber was a small, efficient room adjacent to the throne room, used for private discussions and minor security matters. Captain Marcus closed the door firmly behind them and gestured for Lady Margot to take a seat in one of the simple wooden chairs. The room's stark functionality was a sharp contrast to the ornate luxury of the royal chambers, and the change in atmosphere made Lady Margot's situation feel suddenly very real and very serious. "Lady Margot," Captain Marcus began, his voice still respectful but with an underlying authority that made it clear he was not going to be easily fooled. "I observed you entering the Queen's private chambers during the recess period. Those areas are strictly forbidden to guests, as I'm sure you're aware." Lady Margot's mind raced as she tried to formulate a believable explanation. "I became lost looking for the powder room," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The corridors in this palace are so confusing, and I must have taken a wrong turn." Captain Marcus studied her face carefully, noting the rapid blinking and the way she avoided direct eye contact. "The powder room is clearly marked, and in the opposite direction from where you were observed walking," he replied calmly. "Additionally, several servants reported seeing you move through the corridors with apparent familiarity with the layout, not like someone who was lost." The weight of the evidence against her was becoming clear, and Lady Margot could feel her carefully constructed lies beginning to crumble. The stolen jewelry seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, and she found herself unconsciously touching the area where it was hidden. "I think it would be best for everyone involved if you were to empty your pockets and remove any items that don't belong to you," Captain Marcus continued, his tone becoming more direct. "If you cooperate now, we may be able to handle this matter with some discretion." Tears began to form in Lady Margot's eyes as the full reality of her situation hit her. The financial pressures that had driven her to theft suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the disgrace and legal consequences she now faced. Her reputation, her family name, and her position in society were all about to be destroyed by her moment of desperate weakness. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The debts, the creditors threatening to take everything. I never meant for it to go this far." Captain Marcus felt a moment of sympathy for the desperate woman before him, but his duty to the crown and his respect for justice prevented him from wavering in his responsibilities. "I understand that people sometimes face difficult circumstances," he said gently. "But theft from the royal treasury is a serious crime that I cannot ignore, regardless of the circumstances that led to it." With trembling hands, Lady Margot reached into the hidden pocket of her gown and slowly withdrew the stolen jewelry. The moonfire earrings caught the light from the chamber's small window, their brilliance seeming to mock her failed plan. The ruby rose brooch felt impossibly heavy as she placed it on the table, and the starlight pendant seemed to dim in her guilty hands. The stolen jewelry lay on the wooden table between them like silent witnesses to Lady Margot's crime. Captain Marcus carefully examined each piece, mentally cataloging them against his knowledge of the Queen's collection. The moonfire earrings, the ruby rose brooch, and the starlight pendant were all valuable pieces, but more importantly, they held deep sentimental significance for Queen Isabella. Lady Margot sat in stunned silence, her hands folded in her lap as she stared at the floor. The weight of her actions and their consequences was crushing down upon her like a physical force. She had destroyed everything in a moment of desperation, and there was no way to undo what she had done. "Lady Margot," Captain Marcus said quietly, "I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. Theft from the royal treasury is considered treason against the crown. The traditional punishment for such a crime is imprisonment and complete loss of noble status. These words hit Lady Margot like physical blows. She had known the risks intellectually, but hearing them spoken aloud made them terrifyingly real. Her family name would be disgraced. Her remaining properties would be seized, and she would spend years in a cold prison cell. However, Captain Marcus continued, his voice taking on a slightly different tone, I believe there may be another way to handle this situation, depending on your willingness to cooperate and make amends. Lady Margot looked up sharply, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since she had been caught. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Marcus had been thinking carefully about the best course of action. He had served the royal family long enough to know that Queen Isabella, despite her position of power, was fundamentally a compassionate person who believed in redemption rather than simple punishment. He also understood that a public trial and execution would create unnecessary scandal and might harm the monarchy's reputation. Queen Isabella values honesty and genuine remorse above almost anything else, he explained. If you were to confess your crime directly to her, explain your circumstances, and demonstrate real commitment to making amends, she might be willing to consider an alternative to traditional punishment. The idea of facing Queen Isabella with her confession terrified Lady Margot even more than the prospect of prison. To admit her guilt to the woman she had betrayed, to look into those wise eyes and confess her shameful actions, seemed almost impossible. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. How can I face her after what I've done? The same way you'll face yourself for the rest of your life if you don't, Captain Marcus replied firmly. This is likely your only chance to take responsibility and possibly earn some measure of forgiveness. After several minutes of internal struggle, Lady Margot nodded slowly. What would I need to do? 7. Captain Marcus outlined his proposal. Lady Margot would return to the throne room, request a private audience with the Queen, and confess everything. She would explain her financial difficulties without using them as excuses, express genuine remorse for her actions, and propose a way to make amends beyond simply returning the stolen items. When they returned to the throne room, the formal audience was concluding. Captain Marcus approached one of the Queen's advisors and quietly requested a private moment with Her Majesty. Within minutes, the remaining nobles had been dismissed, and Lady Margot found herself alone in the vast throne room with Queen Isabella and Captain Marcus. Queen Isabella looked puzzled as she studied Lady Margot's tear-stained face and obvious distress. Captain Marcus tells me you have something important to discuss with me privately, she said gently. What troubles you, my dear? Lady Margot took a deep breath and stepped forward, fighting every instinct that told her to run. Your Majesty, she began, her voice shaking. I have committed a terrible crime against you and the crown. I have stolen jewelry from your private chambers, and I am here to confess my actions and accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Queen Isabella's expression shifted from confusion to shock to disappointment, but remarkably, not to anger. She had ruled for many years and had encountered human weakness in all its forms, so while she was saddened by Lady Margot's actions, she was not entirely surprised. I see, Queen Isabella said slowly. And what drove you to this desperate action? Lady Margot explained her financial situation with complete honesty, describing the mounting debts, the failing estates, and the pressure from creditors. She was careful not to present these circumstances as excuses, but simply as the context that had led to her moment of weakness. Queen Isabella listened carefully, asking occasional questions and studying Lady Margot's demeanor throughout the confession. Her years of experience in leadership had taught her to distinguish between genuine remorse and calculated manipulation, and she could see that Lady Margot's regret was authentic. Captain Marcus, the Queen said, please retrieve the stolen items and verify that everything has been returned. As Captain Marcus left to collect the jewelry, Queen Isabella continued her conversation with Lady Margot. Your honesty in confessing your crime demonstrates some honor despite your poor judgment, she said. However, theft from the crown cannot go unpunished, even when motivated by desperation. Aft, Lady Margot nodded, accepting whatever fate awaited her. I hereby strip you of your title and noble status, Queen Isabella announced formally. Your estates will be sold to pay your debts and compensate the crown for this violation of trust. Lady Margot's heart sank as she heard the pronouncement, but she forced herself to remain standing and accept the consequences of her actions. However, the Queen continued. I am offering you an opportunity for redemption. You will serve as a ward of the court. Working in the palace under Captain Marcus's supervision, you will help manage charitable works for citizens facing financial hardship, using your experience with debt and desperation to help others find legitimate solutions to their problems. This unexpected offer of redemption caught Lady Margot completely off guard. Instead of prison or exile, she was being given a chance to rebuild her life while helping others avoid the same mistakes she had made. This arrangement will last for 5 years, Queen Isabella explained. If you serve faithfully and demonstrate genuine reform, your citizenship will be restored, though your noble status will remain forfeited. Do you accept these terms? Through her tears, Lady Margot managed to express her profound gratitude and acceptance. She would spend the following years working to redeem herself, helping establish programs for citizens facing financial crisis, and serving as a living reminder that even in the darkest moments, compassion and justice could offer a path toward redemption. Captain Marcus watched with satisfaction as justice was served with wisdom rather than simple vengeance, knowing that both the crown and Lady Margot would benefit from Queen Isabella's balanced approach to this difficult situation.